Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we are rejoined by Sophia Rosa, a transformational expert, to talk about what it takes to actually get into the mindset of making a drastic change. So, Sophia, thank you for coming on the show. For those of you who don't remember you from last time, because I'm sure everyone watches every episode, could you give us a quick introduction?
Certainly. I am a project and program manager. I manage a project management office right now at my current role. I'm a ProSci certified change practitioner, as well as a mindfulness certified practitioner. All of those things wrapped together help create how I serve in the roles that I choose.
Awesome. So for those, we're talking today about the idea, last time we talked, you mentioned something that kind of blew our minds, which was that much or even most of what you do isn't the actual, the topic of discussion was changing ERP systems. And most of what the work is for your position isn't the actual change of the ERP system. It's getting the humans involved, ready to change and ready for the change. And we talked a bit about mindfulness and all of that. And that's where we wanted to go with today is how do you begin, or how would you even assess if a team is ready for a change, right? They bring you in, they say, we want to change the ERP system or whatever. And, in your head, I'm guessing that your first thought is, well, are you even ready for this change? Because changing the software, if you're not ready, isn't going to work. That much I know.
When you're looking at readiness, I think there's two different avenues that are probably going to be evaluated. And one, of course, is the executive side that's business related, where you're looking for certain KPIs, you're looking for an increase in return, and recognizing maybe processes that are messy or cumbersome or taking manual effort and hours that you'd like to eliminate. So if you've been through that exercise, if you will, of operational cleanup, and you've determined, okay, we need to up the system. That's a very separate decision from what someone in my seat might look at about readiness for change. And in my seat, you really don't get to influence very often anything about the readiness, because that has to do a lot more with the data, the business goals, the strategies, the 5-year, the 10-year, all of that. And so without regretting what I say, there really is never a good time for humans to change. It's our role to support that change. It's our role to offer enough information to get the team to buy in to understanding why the business entity needs that change, without necessarily, and I think we talked about this a bit last time too, there's executive messaging that's very key in all of this. So transparency has its levels and its delicate pieces that you, as a change manager, if you're in that spot, or even as the project manager, are carefully crafting and planning the timing of, to adhere with the business's timing and goals and plans. It isn't so much reading the people. The people are likely going to tell you, well, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. Or that sounds great. And then change their minds, next week. Because we're people, and our identities, are tied into what we do. And some enjoy comfort and predictability, and some claim that they thrive in chaos, and some say, I like strategic growth, or I like to plan exactly. Every one of us is very different from that perspective. So, getting the pulse of the company to figure out if it's time to change is likely not going to be driven by if the people are saying it. Now, in some cases, when there's operational stress and daily jobs are really difficult to execute, and those pain points are something that people are coming to their leadership team and saying, I can't do it like this anymore. maybe that's a good indicator for sure that people in general in the company are ready for change because they've been heard and they've come and reported pain points. That would likely be the only indicator that it's possible, but it also doesn't mean that they're ready to accept what that change really means.
Yes. One thing that you said that really resonated with me is the idea of people will say, oh, yes, that sounds great. And what they imagine you mean and what you imagine you mean are so totally different that when you finally bring it to them, like, okay, you said you wanted this change, and here I've given you change. And like, oh, that wasn't the change I wanted. This change is totally wrong. Yeah. And that's something that Isaac and I talk about a lot, is the shortening that window and making the change smaller so that you find out sooner than later before you've invested as much time and effort. So just I'm thinking back, because through all of what you just said, I feel like Isaac and I we're more familiar as developers. We're more familiar with the operational side, right? Like, these operations aren't working. We need to make a change. This is the stuff that's not working. This is the data, and we understand that part. And the part that I don't see usually, or that I see I know it's an undertow that's going to suck me under and destroy everything, but I don't know what to do about it because it's the ocean. Is hey, we're going to make this change because of all these reasons. And leadership says, yes, go make this change. And this is something I've definitely had, is leadership says, yes, go make this change. And I'm like, okay, but you have to support me. And like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm ready to give you resources and allocate money, and I'll give you millions of dollars. But if you need me to actually like support you, no, that's a bridge too far. So how do you go about bridging that gap? Like, how do you make it? And this is something that I've struggled with, is if I bring that, hey, we need a change, and leadership says, yes, we're on board, we're going to do it. But leadership doesn't actually believe that they have to do anything about it other than say yes to me. And be like, yes, we're going to pay your salary, go forth and change.
That is the key indicator of setting a change up for failure. The number one success factor is sponsorship engagement. So is that executive level individual or team offering not only visibility, but the messaging that helps the organization or the people affected, let's say it's just a few departments or what have you, that lets them know where the decision came from. And that way it takes that pressure off of the team who's making the change. Oftentimes, the users are looking at it and saying, well, who are these guys to tell me that this is how it's got to be?
We're the two Bobs.
Exactly. And without that introduction of, hey, this is what's on the table next, here are the reasons why, here is the predicted outcome that we're looking for, and here's the team that will be executing this with you all. We want to hear your voice. We want to, serve you throughout the process, et cetera. Without those factors in place, sure, that leaves you out hanging out to dry. And that is in ProSci's specific method of actually gathering data and feedback about change. The triangle that they put together has the sponsor at the top, the project management approach on one of the triangle points at the bottom, and the organizational change management at the other one. So those three pieces create a success prediction that they even have boiled down to being able to fill out a questionnaire about the different levels of engagement and ownership on each one of those three planes to spit out a number that'll tell you, here's what your likelihood is of success. And granted, decades of research has gone into that. It's not something you can just decide upon and create for yourself. So I do honor and recognize ProSci for that. And it is really valuable because that, without those three tiers together, and it's possible too, I've seen this a lot, and I've been in these shoes where the organizational change manager and project manager are the same person, or it's the same team, and they either have, expertise on one side or the other, or not really a full view, for example. Mm-hmm. And that team, the reason that they're not the top of that triangle is because they're feeding support, feeding the coaching even to that executive level to give them, here's what we need to communicate at this time. And here's our recommended package to offer it. And then we need to gauge. So how has it been received? What do people think of this? What are the pieces that folks are most concerned about, so that we can put that on our list of things that we're going to add to our next comms, so that folks know that they're heard, that we understand that we're seeing to it. Or even that there's a governance structure in place. Like the people who are affected by change rarely understand that there is an entire process that has happened typically before you reach that point where a change decision has been made. And then when you move through that, what's that process of, okay, here's what we've built so far. Let's say just from the example of product and iteration, and you've rolled out an MVP, you've taken a look at it, you've received the feedback, you're going through an iteration and then doing another review with your internal customer. And if the visibility for those who it actually affects that are not part of that team is not offered, they don't know what ever happened. They don't know that any vetting to any of this has actually even occurred. So from my perspective, so many times, I'm sure. So from my perspective, when you have that opportunity to say, hey, here's where we're at, or even from the very beginning, kickoffs are so important, in my opinion, where the announcement is there, the goals are communicated, and an overarching timeline is available. It's going to need to flex by all means, but there's a goal, and there should be a goal or a target in mind from the very beginning. And when that's laid out there, then the rest of the communication about where you're at in the process, or what has changed, and maybe a little bit as to why, then folks feel that they're a part of the journey. I mean, we live today with social media. Everything is a story. Everything's a story. Why don't we offer the same, a story, to gain followers internally, to say, oh, well, that's an interesting turn of events, or, ooh, maybe my voice will make a difference with this, or, oh, did you hear A, B, C, or D? And I think that's a little bit of an extreme, because from the perspective of like professional communication, it isn't going to be to the extent of Instagram stories and drama and clickbait and so on and so forth, but it does need to draw you in. It does need to give you enough to say, I care about this.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's... I want to take a minute to process this, but I don't want to leave a minute of dead time on. Coming at it from the perspective of developers who are bringing this up to leadership, it sounds like what you're saying is one of the key, most important pieces is that you have to expect you're going to need to manage up to get your executives to broadcast the message. And it has to come from the executives and not from you, the developer.
That's right. Yes. That executive can empower you, and that introduction or that handoff has to be visible to those who the change affects, so that everybody wants to hear from their boss. Everybody wants to hear from their president. Everybody wants to hear from their CEO and think that they're talking directly to them, and that they care specifically about their opinion. So
and the work they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And that they're supporting that their work is going to be easier or better or more effective, et cetera, et cetera. Because, I mean, being seen for the wrong reasons, some people like that, but, so not from that position of analysis or micromanagement, but that I'm a part of this group, and my company president knows that, and my company CEO pays attention to that. And if that person then says, I'm really excited to entrust so-and-so, insert name, as the lead of this project, you'll hear from him quite a bit, or her, and that introduction has been made, that sets things up for success. But it's also not enough to carry it all the way through and be like, great, I introed, I'm out of here, exit stage left.
Right.
You know, it's
good for 12 months.
Exactly. You got to continue back around to say, I've heard from so-and-so, here's how things are going, I'm proud of the team, or I'm looking forward to seeing how you scale this issue and come up with a mitigation. I have faith in you all, et cetera. And that's what the organizational change management team feeds a little bit. So that executive doesn't necessarily have to understand it or come up with it on their own. They may be so far removed up in the mountains with that bird's eye view that they don't have that pulse. But that OCM team and the PM team comes to be able to say, this is what's happening. That's where those executive status reports are so important. And then helping them craft that message. So those who are most successful and the ones that look real polished definitely have a team behind them, setting them up for success for that.
Awesome. So let's say you're in a bad spot, right? You've come up, you're a developer or you're a team of developers, and you've started a change, and you have the blessings of the executives, but it's now 6 months in and they never really did any kind of comms or ops, and you're now starting to get pushback from people who are not particularly they're not negative, right? Most of the time, it's rare that you get somebody negative and against you. It's more of they're just ignoring you. I mean, that's been my experience of you're doing a transformation, you've written new software, and nobody's using it. And what are you going to do? Stand over them with a baseball bat? I mean, it's work. How do you recover, or can you recover? If you're still in the game, how do you try to recover?
I would say I'd go back to the story. And when you bring forward the purpose or the reason behind it, and even sometimes speak to people as though they are already bought in, sometimes, depends, it's real careful on that one, because you don't want to assume that everybody's excited about it and speak to others when it's very clear that they're not engaged. However, when you talk about it from the perspective of what's in it for them, and we talked about that the last time, I think I had used the acronym, the WIFM, what's in it for me. When you go back to that portion of it to say, hey, this initiative that started at such and such a time is absolutely dependent on hearing your voice, because we want to make A, B, C, and D better for you. We want to hear what your pain points are. What are your hesitations? There's been silence. It's okay to acknowledge that. There's been silence. What has you holding back from offering your input? Because your input is what drives the real result, because it's built for you, if those things are true, obviously. And so it comes back to that almost a position of this project is one of service. So in order to give you that service, we need your story. We need to understand what's happening. And we've missed you. We haven't talked to you for a while. What's new, you know? And again, that can be really difficult to manage if you don't have somebody specifically in that role who is the liaison between the developer team and the internal stakeholders, or, you know, the customer that you're building this for, et cetera. And when that's left on the developers or the lead for the project, it can be deafening. That silence can be deafening and can put things into a hold that was never intended for it to be one. And that then, of course, derails a timeline. So all of those things mixed together with, if you don't have that person who has decided at the beginning, and even if it is a developer on the team, as long as it's defined at the beginning, if you're doing something similar to a RACI, so the responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed matrix, then you'll know, if you've got that outlined, who on the team is responsible for delivering that news or engaging with those who have been quiet. And then what are we going to do with it from there? And so that grid has a lot of value when you take the time up front to do it. You don't always necessarily do, because the idea is, oh, this is going to be done in 3 months. We all know what we need to do. We've got all of the requirements. We have, the user stories, the backlog, everything's ready to go. And then, like you said, these types of things happen. So that's where product and project managers in product management, so PM,
yes,
can be really helpful and valuable from that perspective to see those things, have them established so that should you need to pull them out of your back pocket, you know who's responsible for doing so.
This time, as I was hearing you two talk about this, it kind of reminded me of some past companies where there's a lot of broken trust at the companies, but change needed to happen there anyway. So is whenever someone goes, okay, well, we need to change some things here. Do you guys help with the rebuilding of that trust, or is it the rebuilding of that trust kind of something, a prerequisite before someone like you is brought in to try to change things? Because if someone's already, they don't believe that the company is going to do anything for the better, they don't believe you when you say we're doing this to help you out, they're like, yeah, right, I've heard that before. How do you rebuild that kind of trust in a company that definitely needs change but have people resistant because they've kind of fallen off and they don't believe in the mission anymore, even though they don't want to leave quite yet?
It's definitely not chicken before the egg, where a change manager would be in place only after trust exists. That change manager is offering the opportunity to rebuild trust throughout the journey. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it does have to do with face-to-face interaction. So when you're looking at stakeholder registers, it's not just a bunch of names. It's also who's on board, who's a change agent, who's afraid, who's expressing things that sound like resistance. And there's mitigation plans, books upon books on what to do with each particular scenario. And oftentimes it has to do with just getting into the opportunity to sit one-on-one with someone and hear their perspective. Because, and I think, not to re-say everything that I had said when we talked the first time, but it was super impactful for me when I had a change management mentor, and she expressed to me that resistance is feedback cloaked in negativity. So you do need someone in that face-to-face engagement who can recognize that what I'm hearing is cloaked. I need to pull off a few layers to hear what the real viewpoint is of this person, because that is a valid viewpoint. Anytime that we're addressed in such a way or engaged with folks at work that validate that our view means something, trust is ignited. It doesn't mean that who's receiving it is going to promise action that's going to do exactly how you envision it. But we've all been in trusting relationships and recognize that it's actually less about somebody doing everything we want than it is about being heard and valued.
Yeah, I really like that. I think having somebody with that viewpoint would definitely have helped repair trust at organizations that broke it with me. Because I think, I don't remember if it was last time or not, but it was definitely a prior episode where I was just really happy to hear after we had a swap of a CTO. I was talking to them about, hey, I feel like no one's ever heard me when I complain about this thing. We never changed this thing. And they were like, okay, well, I'm hearing you now. And the thing you're bringing up, we're just not going to focus on that right now. It's important to your team, but to the company, it's actually one of the minor problems compared to these other really big ones that we have. So we're going to write it down and put it on the backlog. And, this is me marking that I've heard you, but let me just formally say that that's not going to be our priority. And that just made a world of difference for me, because I felt like I was just talking to a wall prior, because everyone would just, okay, yeah, it sounds like an issue, and then no one would do anything. But this was somebody just addressing it and saying, I hear you, we're not going to do anything about it right now, but that sounds like a problem. And so just having that kind of validation, I was like, okay, I have an answer. I can work with this. And that builds a little bit of trust for sure.
Absolutely. Even though that receipt of solutioning is delayed, now you've been addressed and you know that it's out there. So that does help a lot.
Yeah, even there where you know they're not going to do it because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Now you know why. And,
Yeah.
Maybe that's okay. Maybe probably that's better than nothing.
Yeah, I'd rather somebody say we're not going to do that thing than just to never respond to me.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
By all means. And that's another key role that organizational change managers and project managers play, is the front lines of responsiveness. Mm-hmm. And that by itself can begin to create trust. When higher level sponsors have inboxes that have thousands and thousands of messages from who knows where and everything else, it's so easy to lose track of that. And so when there's built-in methods to obtain feedback, more than just one-on-ones, and people don't love surveys, so we try not to call them surveys technically, but forums, places where you can have a coffee chat, for example, and talk about what you've experienced. It can be informal, doesn't have to be written. Not everybody likes to do it that way. It can be completely anonymous. You offer all different types of channels for folks to be able to express themselves about what they've been given and also what they haven't. What is it that you would really like to better understand about what's happening here? And that goes on a list. And then the results of that can also be shared, especially if they're anonymous. Here's the feedback that we got. 50% of you say, you're not ready for this. You haven't received the training. You don't understand at all what you're supposed to do on day one. You know what? We heard you. So in May, we're going to do a sit-down lunch and learn for anybody who's interested in attending, so we can address that, et cetera, et cetera. So those types of things continue to help people feel supported during that. It's an emotional experience. Yes, we're talking about the workplace, but we're all, sentient beings. So our emotional responses to those things are going to go through, I get it. I know why this is happening. I've got the knowledge that I need, I think, about what's expected of me, but do I have the desire? And if I don't have the desire, why don't I? What's holding me back? So to help folks understand where they're at in that process is why I, in particular, chose to bring mindfulness into the implementation process. Completely optional. I do not ever recommend requiring anybody to participate in something as unique and personal as mindfulness. But the open invitation is a wonderful thing. And feedback that's shared after that, and folks that are word of mouth saying this was a great session, or I really understood more about what was happening for me, come with me next time. That's all great. So that's where my personal philosophy has developed, where it's, yes, we've got to manage the timeline, the scope, and the budget. Absolutely. Those are the pillars. That's the foundation. And then where are we at with our awareness? Does the team have the desire to do this? Have they backslid in, buy-in? And what are those reasons? And how do we help people even know where they are in that process without some level of pause and self-awareness? And that's where the mindfulness comes in. So my mentor, the woman who owns the Calm Monkey, who I'm certified through, was a trailblazer in this particular area. In, I want to say 2010, she wrote a white paper about how all of these things come together. And she was a change manager before it was a popular thing. So really was at the forefront of shaping the practice. And I'm so inspired by that and the way that she has pulled all of that together, because it's a wonderful way to support us as feeling individuals who have our identity tied to sometimes our performance, but in other ways, our relationships. I mean, there's all different ways that we define ourselves, and we show up to work and we all put our heads into the center about a shared goal, but we don't own that company. It isn't for us. We choose to be there to serve. We choose to be there to have an agreement where I do this thing, you offer me this compensation. That's what our culture here is based on. And the feelings that we have about that come along with it. So to support all three, it's not just about, because some people's critique, and even sometimes mine, about organizational change management is that it's marketing. And if you're not careful, it could become that way.
Right.
You're not trying to sell anybody on your project. You want to invite them along and give them a seat at that table through the story, through hearing them. And if someone takes a seat at that table and is totally unaware of why they absolutely hate the idea of the whole thing, that resistance is going to take a long time to pull all of those cloaks off of there, unless that person can take a moment and step back and recognize, man, I'm really uncomfortable. Sometimes people don't even realize that. We communicate in ways that show it all over us, and yet they don't recognize that that's the case. They think sometimes when stakeholders who are in high levels of resistance think that they're going to change everybody by expressing how they think that this is worthless. And don't realize that that means that by itself is the indicator that they have something unsaid that they need to express. So that's where I was inspired actually over the summer to put together my own version of ERP implementation methodology. And I named it Impact. So it's integrated management practice aligning change with technology transformation. And in that, it pulls all of these pieces together. And it's a high level, phased methodology. And it has, artifacts that I can provide to actually support the work. And it has the actual mindfulness sessions that are delivered at particular key phases of an implementation. And of course, because of my work and my background, it is focused more on an organizational change like an ERP, as opposed to a product that's being rolled out. And it can be scaled. It is a scalable thing. You can pull pieces out of it or into it at any level, because we're all engaged in a very similar process when we've got to start something, communicate the reasons for it, obtain buy-in, keep the momentum going, deliver, iterate, and arrive. So I'm pretty excited about it. I trademarked it over the summer and have some plans about what to do with it from here. But yeah, that's the introduction. It's called Impact.
So not available anywhere yet?
Not yet.
Okay. I was going to say, because we definitely need to link to that. But maybe in early, you should make a buy now form that, subscribe now to be notified, and we could link to that.
Absolutely. Sure. Yes, thank you. I would appreciate that.
Well, I think this is, we seem to have hit a lull and we're around time. Should we, because I could keep going all day. You're just blowing my mind. I'm like, okay. And when you slow down, I'm like, all right, I gotta get her talking again because I'm learning so much. Sophia,
one thing I can offer you that is in existence right now is it's not specific to implementations, but it is specific to mindfulness. So if that's something that interests you or the audience, just to see what that even means or what it's like, I am a teacher on the application called Insight Timer. Insight Timer has worldwide teachers all over the place, courses, all kinds of things, but you can download the app for free. You don't have to subscribe to be able to use them. You can listen to all the tracks that I've put on my profile at this time for free as well. And it's a nice way to start to understand what mindfulness is, and then understand how, this is how I can use it. You could even apply it for yourself if you aren't in an organization or a change that's offering that to you. If you understand a little bit about the methodology of what it is to move through that, to find that self-awareness, that's a good place just to support yourself through a change, personal or otherwise.
I'll definitely put that in the show notes and take a look. Yeah, because in general, I wish I had somebody like you around at least two other organizations that I think could have benefited, if not just for the advice, just for the conversations. Because
Yes.
a lot of the psychology around like the resistance you're talking about, like understanding the feedback, like where the negativity is coming from, why people are resistant to change. Those conversations, I don't know why, if it was just a culture thing or, the company culture thing, but they haven't happened often enough. And I think if people would actually get to the root of that, just like with any other kind of, if you go off in even just like the therapy part of it, I know you don't want to really tie in therapy with work conceptually, but having conversations around like, why am I, that mindfulness component, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling resistant to this? And really getting in and addressing that instead of just the how it comes out, the resistance piece, where someone's just and they just always push back on everything. Like, why are you that way? And what can we change in a genuine way? Because I have definitely heard over the years too, oh yeah, there's going to be a big change and everything will be different and awesome now. And you're like, yeah, right. That's the fourth time I've heard this. Is the fourth big organization change, but they've lacked some of the things you've mentioned, like the having that sponsor, that feedback loop to help the sponsor succeed, and like even bringing up the feedback from the people, and in your town hall or whatever, your lunch and learn. This is the feedback that we've got. Somebody said this. This is how we're going to address that. Last time we left off on these notes. This is what we've made progress on. All those things are just such great ways to keep the momentum going, and in the hindsight here, they were just missing in those other conversations at other organizations I was at, and I think that's probably why it failed and people kept getting more and more broken trust. So thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you. Another small nuance to that is that the OCM practitioner is not necessarily only going to be uploading the sponsor, but is also preparing things to help the people managers, so the people that have direct reports that are going to come to them, prepared with, here's what your team might be interested in hearing about next. Here's how you can address it before it even becomes something that's a problem. So if you have a daily stand-up or you have a weekly sync with your team, maybe bring up these particular points. And that's another way to just allow it to infiltrate throughout, so that that support isn't just coming from one place or someone unreachable, but also the people that you directly engage with on a regular basis. So organizational change management touches all of those pieces.
That proactiveness builds trust for me too, because if someone's getting ahead of the problem and saying, hey, we're worried about this too, before I have to complain about it, that means they actually cared. They actually like paid attention enough. So that's a good call out.
Awesome, Sophia. Thank you so much for coming on again. This was just an absolutely amazing, delightful episode. If people wanted to reach out to try and work with you directly, what would be a good way for them to find you?
The best place at this point is my LinkedIn profile, Sophia Rosa. And of course, again, I invite anyone to also search my name in the application Insight Timer to get yourself introduced to some mindfulness if you so choose.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.